Another urgent priority for bringing down the cost of living is to stop the colossal fraud that is bleeding American taxpayers absolutely dry. The fraud being committed by the Somali population in Minnesota. Have you heard of them? They're lovely people.
6:42 a.m. The Trump administration is taking action against thousands connected to a large-scale fraud scandal in Minnesota. A governor exploited childcare relief funds through the Super Kids Childcare Center. More than 750 children vanished without a trace in a $2.8 billion embezzlement scheme. Nearly $400 million was siphoned from the federal government through an organized operation. Do you want to know the truth they tried to hide? Hit like, I will expose it all. 6:42 a.m. in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The city had not fully awakened. At minus 10 degrees Celsius, 11 degrees Fahrenheit, the cold pressed the streets into silence. In the Southern District, the roads were empty, except for the exhaust smoke drifting from the engine of an unmarked SUV parked along the curb. Inside those vehicles were 21 federal inspectors, a joint team from the FBI and the Department of Health and Human Services. They were not there to make a drug arrest, nor were they there to hunt street criminals. On paper, their mission was a routine compliance inspection of a state-licensed childcare center. The facility was operated by Nimco Ali Hassan, 45, a Somali official well known within the city's leadership circles.
You can see this child care center that has received millions of dollars in federal tax money over the past 6 years can't even spell learning right on its sign.
State records showed that she controlled 5 child care centers across residential areas of the Twin Cities. The files listed more than 750 children under daily care. With enrollment numbers that high, government subsidies flowed steadily and without interruption. State and federal authorities raided Hassan's child care center in South Minneapolis. A partner business linked to her operations was suspected of systematic billing fraud. Over more than 5 years, payments to this network had exceeded $2.8 billion. As agents approached the entrance, the building was unnervingly silent. No parents, no children, no staff. The lead inspector forced the door open. Inside, the air was cold and stale. No one was there. Toys were neatly lined up on shelves, covered with a thin layer of dust, untouched. Cribs were fully assembled in the infant room, mattresses spotless, no signs of use. An attendance board hung on the wall, completely filled in with blue ink. Every name recorded, every slot checked, and yet the room showed no trace of children. Over the past 12 months, this center had collected more than $46 million in taxpayer funds. There was no evidence that a single child had ever spent a full day there. Inside Hassan's private office, investigators uncovered the architecture of the fraud. A thick binder detailed over 700 fictitious children. Page by page, the plan revealed itself. These were not temporary numbers. The network had created false identities, combining real social security numbers purchased on the black market with illegally printed, forged birth certificates. A population of ghost children existed only inside the state payment system, allowing the theft of $250 million from funds meant for low-income children. The most disturbing discovery was found inside a steel safe. When it was breached, agents found not only financial records but $38 million in cash, tightly wrapped in black plastic. On top of it sat 5 sealed packages containing approximately 270 kilograms of narcotics, stamped with the scorpion emblem of the CJNG cartel. In that moment, the truth became unmistakable. This was not benefit fraud. This was not corruption. This was a cartel money laundering hub, operating under the cover of a child care license. Hassan was not running a daycare. She was running a cartel bank funded by American taxpayer dollars. If you believe that stealing money meant for poor children is a crime that must be condemned, like this video, subscribe to the channel and comment "Justice" below. The inspection had transformed into a deeply unsettling federal crime scene. By mid-morning, federal auditors launched an intensive review of the facility's licensing records. What they uncovered violated every rule of reason. The documents indicated that Hassan, together with a relative listed as a strict municipal official, was able to oversee multiple locations simultaneously. Children's birth date records were duplicated, rotated, and reassigned. There were no food supply agreements, no childcare maintenance costs. The data told a different truth. Money was moved offshore in calculated waves. Each transfer remained under federal reporting thresholds. More than $400 million was processed through a single account in under 9 months without paying a single employee. The funds were routed to East Africa, the Middle East, and drug production facilities in Mexico. Over just 3 years, 2.2 tons of heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl entered the United States. This operation did not endure by hiding. It endured by blending in. Behind the flawless forms stood a financial machine siphoning billions of dollars. Investigators uncovered evidence of carefully staged operations designed to mislead neighbors. In Hassan's digital records, they found a schedule labeled simulated shifts. It described rotating assignments for paid actors hired to park vehicles during pickup hours. Hidden outdoor speakers replayed recordings of children laughing throughout the day. A rotating fleet of used children's vehicles was shifted between sites to preserve the illusion of legitimacy. It was a meticulously staged performance, meant for only one observer, the state inspector. By evening, the investigation pivoted from audit to hunt. Everything was exposed. There would be no delay. If you believe federal agents can shut down this multi-billion-dollar extraction network, comment "destroy." Your support strengthens the resolve of U.S. federal authorities. At 10:58 p.m., federal prosecutors authorized a coordinated operation. This was no longer an inspection, it was a sweep. Within minutes, more than 291 FBI, ICE, and DEA tactical personnel were mobilized across Minneapolis. All 5 child care facilities controlled by the network were breached simultaneously. An additional 12 virtual shell offices were entered as well. As tactical teams cleared the buildings, alarms detonated across the financial system. Money began moving chaotically. In less than 18 minutes, more than $96 million was pushed through financial tunnels engineered to collapse once triggered. Someone on the other end knew the federal government was already inside. Then the confirmation came and the operation became a hunt. Surveillance footage showed Nimco Ali Hassan leaving her residence hours earlier. Automated license plate readers tracked her vehicle heading south. Maritime records confirmed a private vessel scheduled to depart before dawn. She was fleeing, but the investigation uncovered something far worse. At 2:18 a.m., analysts decoding encrypted communications identified a command hub 30 miles outside the city. The site was registered as an abandoned industrial zone. Tax records showed no activity for years. Utility data exposed the truth. Nightly electricity usage spiked sharply. Water consumption exceeded 90,000 gallons per day. At 3:06 a.m., aerial surveillance drones confirmed activity. Vehicles entered the compound on fixed schedules. Exhaust smoke poured from multiple ventilation shafts. This was not a warehouse. This was a factory, funded with money stolen from Minnesota's children. At 4:21 a.m., the final order was issued. Entry was authorized. Headlights cut through the darkness as tactical teams advanced toward the primary access points. The structure no longer appeared industrial. It appeared fortified. The first breach was silent. A controlled charge shattered a reinforced steel door. Seconds later, gunfire erupted. Cartel members inside the facility opened fire on federal agents as entry teams pushed through the breach. Muzzle flashes lit the corridors as agents returned fire and took cover. The exchange was brief but violent. Tactical units advanced methodically, clearing rooms under live fire. Within 10 minutes, the resistance collapsed. 19 cartel members were subdued on site. 3 sustained minor injuries. The remaining suspects were restrained, forced to their knees, and secured at gunpoint. The scene was contained. Inside, the air was not just hot, it was toxic. Agents reported a metallic taste the moment the seals were broken. Industrial filtration systems lined the walls, operating at full capacity to mask chemical emissions from thermal satellites. Conveyor belts continued to run. Production counters continued to climb. Beyond a secondary corridor, agents discovered the human cost. Inside a dark detention room, they found 62 people. 17 were U.S. citizens. The rest came from multiple countries. Several had been reported missing 6 to 9 months earlier. They sat on the floor, starving and terrified. One man's heart rate barely registered above 40 beats per minute, and the workers were not merely prisoners. They were ghosts. Their fingerprints had been erased with acid to prevent identification if they escaped. This was the cartel's insurance policy against human error. As rescue teams evacuated the detainees, evidence units advanced into the production sector. What they uncovered stunned even seasoned agents. Stolen childcare subsidies had been used to purchase precursor chemicals. Financial ledgers showed $1.4 billion in purchases over 18 months. The factory produced 32 to 38 tons of fentanyl per day and more than 71 tons of cocaine per week. It was a closed loop. The government funded childcare. Childcare laundered the money. The money fueled the drug factory. The drugs devastated communities. By 5:19 a.m., the scale of the operation was undeniable. The production facility spanned 4 floors. One log recorded a single week's output valued at over $3.2 billion. As dawn broke, the entire complex was fully secured. The silence that followed was unbearable. If you believe the United States needs a comprehensive audit of every welfare program, comment accountability below. At 10:26 a.m., federal briefings began inside a heavily secured facility. Confirmed financial losses to taxpayers now exceeded $7.3 billion, money that never reached the people it was meant to protect. Investigators concluded that more than 70,000 low-income children statewide lost access to child care services after funds were diverted into this criminal network. Legitimate child care providers were forced to shut down, unable to compete with a scheme that paid no food costs, no staff wages, and no maintenance expenses. In several neighborhoods, licensed child care capacity fell by nearly 22%, leaving working families without options. The system was not blind, it chose not to see. Approvals became automatic. Oversight became procedural. In a framework designed for efficiency, repetition was mistaken for reliability, and volume was mistaken for legitimacy. This case compelled a hard examination of the vulnerabilities inside the American welfare system. For years, the priority had been access, moving money quickly to those in need. But speed killed verification. Safeguards were relaxed, exceptions normalized, and warning signals buried beneath administrative momentum. The network of ghost children exploited the very compassion that defined the system. They understood that officials feared asking difficult questions. They weaponized political correctness, regulatory fatigue, and institutional caution to steal billions of dollars in plain sight. The investigation into Nimco Ali Hassan demonstrated that the most dangerous threats do not always resemble criminals. Sometimes they look like community pillars. They attend meetings, they follow procedures, they complete paperwork flawlessly, and they steal the future right in front of us. This was not a failure of technology. It was a failure of accountability. Red flags appeared repeatedly. Duplicate addresses, recycled identities, implausible enrollment growth. But each signal was dismissed in favor of continuity. The factory was shut down. The accounts were frozen. Assets were seized. Yet the deeper question remains unanswered. How many other empty facilities are operating right now, collecting millions while children receive nothing? How many programs are reporting perfect compliance while delivering zero impact? How many systems reward silence over scrutiny? This case exposed a truth that can no longer be ignored. When oversight becomes ceremonial, fraud becomes inevitable. Compassion without verification becomes an invitation. And when institutions prioritize speed over integrity, exploitation follows. The damage is not measured only in dollars, but in lost childhoods, closed businesses, and broken trust. The lesson is stark and unavoidable. Accountability is not optional. It is the only defense against systemic abuse. The machines can be rebuilt, the funds can be recovered. But unless the culture changes, unless questions are welcomed and verification is restored, the same vulnerabilities will be exploited again by actors just as disciplined, just as patient, and just as invisible. When the doors were finally sealed and the lights went out at the exposed facilities, Minneapolis did not feel relief. It felt hollow. Within 72 hours, the consequences rippled outward with brutal speed. More than 18,000 families across the Twin Cities received abrupt notices that their child care placements were suspended or terminated. Parents who had structured their entire work lives around licensed care suddenly had nothing. By the end of the week, local employment offices reported a 14% spike in emergency leave requests, overwhelmingly from single parents and grandparents raising children. This was not an inconvenience. It was an economic shock. The damage spread fast. Investigators confirmed that at least 146 legitimate child care providers had already closed over the previous 3 years, unable to compete with centers that paid zero food costs, zero staff wages, and zero maintenance expenses. Those closures were no accident. They were the silent casualties of a system distorted by fraud. In several working-class neighborhoods, licensed child care capacity collapsed by nearly 22%, creating what officials quietly called care deserts. The numbers were staggering, but the human cost was worse. State analysts concluded that more than 70,000 low-income children lost access to early child care services as funds were siphoned away. These were not abstract statistics. These were toddlers missing meals, children losing structured learning, and families pushed into survival mode. One internal report estimated that households affected by the collapse lost an average of $1,400 per month in wages due to missed work. For families already living on the margin, that was catastrophic. In immigrant communities, fear replaced trust almost overnight. Community centers reported attendance drops of 30 to 40% as parents pulled back, worried that any interaction with social services could place them under scrutiny. The irony was painful. Thousands of innocent families, already struggling, paid the price for a scheme they had no part in. The silence that followed was not ignorance. It was self-protection. City infrastructure strained under the weight. Emergency assistance requests surged by 19% in a single month. Food banks reported record demand. Shelters quietly prepared for an influx they could not handle. Minneapolis had not lost money alone. It had lost stability. And still, the most unsettling realization came from what investigators did not find. There were no warning sirens, no dramatic system failures. The fraud had not crashed the welfare network. It had coexisted with it, undetected, for years. The paperwork was perfect. The forms were flawless. The approvals never stopped. The system did exactly what it was designed to do: move money quickly, efficiently, and without asking too many questions. By the time the truth emerged, the city was already hollowed out. This was not just a criminal operation stealing billions. It was a slow extraction of opportunity, conducted in plain sight. Legitimate businesses collapsed. Families lost livelihoods. Children lost time that can never be replaced. Trust, once broken, did not return with a press conference. As Minneapolis tried to regain its footing, one fact became unavoidable. The cost of this operation could not be measured only in dollars. It was measured in closed classrooms, empty neighborhoods, and exhausted families staring at calendars they could no longer control. The raid ended the scheme, but it left behind a city forced to reckon with the damage it never saw coming. By the time the dust settled in Minneapolis, one truth had become impossible to ignore. This operation did not survive because it was hidden. It survived because it was allowed. As investigators moved beyond the crime scenes and into administrative records, the focus shifted away from Nimco Ali Hassan herself. The real question was no longer what she did, it was who made it possible. Over a 5-year period, Hassan's network received more than 1,200 separate approvals from state and municipal offices. Licensing renewals were granted automatically. Payment authorizations were signed in batches. In some cases, a single official approved over $94 million in reimbursements in under 48 hours, without conducting a single on-site verification. This was not negligence in isolation. It was repetition. It was routine. Internal audit logs revealed that at least 17 red flags were formally recorded and dismissed. Duplicate child records, identical enrollment lists across different locations, facilities reporting perfect attendance 365 days a year, including holidays and blizzards. One center claimed to serve 163 infants with a staff of 2. No follow-up occurred. Why? Because the system rewarded speed, not scrutiny. Between 2020 and 2024, Minnesota expanded emergency childcare funding by nearly 62%, driven by political pressure to get money out the door. Verification requirements were quietly reduced. Physical inspections dropped by 41% statewide. In several districts, inspectors were instructed to rely on documentation compliance rather than in-person checks. Paper replaced presence. Forms replaced reality. And the forms were flawless. Investigators later confirmed that the same approval officer's signatures appeared on over 70% of Hassan-linked reimbursements. These were not low-level clerks. They were senior administrators, shielded by layers of procedure. No bribes were documented, no cash exchanges found. What existed instead was something far more dangerous: institutional comfort. No one wanted to be the person who slowed the process. No one wanted to ask questions that might be interpreted as bias. No one wanted to challenge a community leader whose paperwork was always perfect. Silence became policy. Meeting transcripts painted a disturbing picture. Concerns were raised, briefly, then redirected. Phrases like "no actionable discrepancy" and "within acceptable variance" appeared again and again. In one meeting, an analyst questioned how a single operator could manage 5 high-capacity centers simultaneously. The response was recorded in writing. Volume indicates success. Volume did not indicate success. Volume math alarm sounded. The system rewarded those who blended in. The most chilling discovery was how easily trust became a weapon. Hassan's network did not intimidate regulators. It did not bribe them. It relied on something far more reliable: the fear of asking difficult questions. Officials hesitated. Inspectors deferred. Administrators approved. Everyone assumed someone else was checking. No one was. By the time the truth surfaced, the damage extended far beyond Minnesota. Financial forensics linked stolen subsidies to drug production, human trafficking, and offshore laundering. Every dollar diverted into that closed loop multiplied harm downstream: overdoses, crime, missing persons, and destabilized communities. The system had not simply been robbed, it had been turned against itself. For older Americans watching this unfold, the implications were especially stark. These programs were built over generations, funded by decades of payroll taxes and public trust. They were meant to protect children, families, and the most vulnerable among us. Instead, they became pipelines for exploitation. The final audit estimated that over 110,000 children nationwide may have been indirectly affected by similar schemes. Children who never received services that were fully paid for in their names. Childhood is not refundable. Lost time cannot be reimbursed. The factories were shut down. The accounts were seized. The headlines moved on. But the question refused to disappear. How many empty buildings are still operating today? Doors locked, lights off, while millions flow in on paper? How many programs report flawless compliance while delivering nothing at all? How many officials sleep well, comforted by forms that look correct, while reality is never checked? This case proved one brutal truth. When oversight becomes ceremonial, fraud becomes inevitable. When systems prioritize speed over integrity, exploitation is not an accident, it is an outcome. And when institutions punish scrutiny more than theft, silence becomes the most valuable currency of all. The machines can be rebuilt, the funds can be recovered. But unless the culture changes, unless questions are welcomed and verification becomes non-negotiable, the same blueprint will be reused by actors just as disciplined, just as patient, and just as invisible. Accountability is not optional, it is the only defense left. Theft. By the end of 2023, Hassan's network had cycled funds through 43 intermediary accounts, all of which passed compliance checks. Not one triggered a mandatory escalation. Not one was frozen until federal agents intervened. The system did not fail loudly. It failed quietly, and it failed consistently. This was not about one corrupt official. It was about a culture that mistook repetition for legitimacy and politeness for integrity. The machinery functioned smoothly while billions vanished, and that is the most uncomfortable truth of all. This network did not break the system. It used it exactly as designed. By choosing convenience over confrontation and speed over verification, the doors were not forced open. They were held open, day after day, signature after signature, until the cost became impossible to ignore. When federal agents closed the last file and the final account was frozen, the investigation reached its legal conclusion. But the moral reckoning had only begun. The collapse of Nimco Ali Hassan's network forced an uncomfortable realization at the highest levels of government. This was not an isolated anomaly. It was a repeatable model, one that required no hacking, no violence, and no deception of the system itself. Only patience, paperwork, and silence. Federal analysts reviewing the case issued a warning that never reached the press. Using conservative modeling, they concluded that similar welfare-linked fraud structures could be operating in as many as 14 states, hidden inside programs designed to move money quickly during emergencies. If even 1% of national child care and social service funding were compromised at the same scale, the losses would exceed $32 billion annually. That number alone should stop anyone cold. But the danger was never just financial. Investigators discovered that Hassan's operation exploited a structural weakness shared by nearly every modern welfare system: compassion without verification. Programs built to help vulnerable populations were intentionally designed to minimize friction. Oversight was reduced to avoid delays. Questions were discouraged to avoid offense. Speed became the highest virtue, and speed killed accountability. Across the country, auditors identified thousands of facilities reporting perfect compliance, no absences, no complaints, no irregular expenses. In theory, perfection looked admirable. In practice, it was statistically impossible. One internal review found that fewer than 0.3% of legitimate childcare centers maintain full enrollment year-round. Yet in emergency-funded programs, that number mysteriously jumped to over 11%. No alarm